Hey everybody, Mary Z here for VoiceHacks.net, bringing you more videos for April. I just wanted to tell you guys a little bit about the correct way to breathe for screamers. My screaming videos are incredibly popular, and I really want to address that the most important thing for a screamer to do is learn how to breathe. We're making noise and we're doing it without slamming the vocal cords together, and we want to make sure that when we're doing that the power is not coming from our throat. We don't want to feel any pain or tension in our throat. We want to go ahead and use the air, and I'm going to show you how to do that with a couple exercises. So this first exercise is all about learning to breathe from the abdomen. So your diaphragm is a muscle that sits underneath your lungs. It sits like this, and when you breathe in, it folds down and it pushes your guts out. When you squeeze back up against your guts, your diaphragm gets pushed up on and the lungs get squeezed on. And that's when you get your power. You can't possibly sing or scream correctly if you're breathing like this. That just won't work to maintain a steady amount of air pressure. You need to learn to control your breathing, and how we do that is with posture. So follow me for these actually three exercises that'll help you become a much, much better screamer. First exercise, we're going to be standing. If you try to do these sitting, it's going to be really tough because 30% of your air support gets cut off by sitting and bending in the middle. For learning purposes, you really need to stand for these exercises. So go ahead and stand nice and tall. Imagine that you've got a string sort of pulling your head up. Make sure you've got your head out of the neck area here. Make sure the turtle's out of the shell. And what you want to do is you want to imagine that your sternum is also, your breastplate here, being lifted by a string. You want to imagine that it's being pulled toward the ceiling as well. So you'll have a nice posture, but you won't be pulling too far the other direction. So we don't want to be too far this way or too far this way. You just want to be nice and tall. And use this tip, this is from yoga, to imagine that there's a string lifting your sternum that will really be key to achieving this exercise. All of singing is about mental pictures. So you need to be mentally visualizing things to tap into the abstract thought that controls your voice. So we're going to stand tall. I'm going to imagine my sternum lifting, and I'm going to breathe in and fill my lungs. Now, if I'm already tall, my lungs will fill up without my shoulders going, you know. Your shoulders raise and lower when your posture starts out bad like this, because your lungs have nowhere to go. But if you're already standing tall and your sternum is lifted, everything should be fine. So we start there, and then we blow out on a long for as long as we can. And as we're blowing out, the key to learning to do this successfully is to lift the sternum while you're blowing out. Don't breathe out and let your shoulders collapse. That's not how to control your air pressure. Controlling your air pressure is from abdominal support, and it's from squeezing from the bottom. So you have to imagine yourself like a toothpaste tube, where the pressure of the squeeze comes from your lowest abdomen as it presses up against the lungs, but the top never really collapses. Your head's the cap, your shoulders are like the part of the toothpaste tube that never really bends when you get all the way to the top. You don't want to end your breathing exercise like this. If you just imagine your sternum being pulled up and lifted while you blow out on that long hiss, your abdomen will automatically and involuntarily contract that air out. So this is how you'll do it. Let me demonstrate. I stand nice and tall, I lift my sternum, and I take a deep breath in, and I blow out on a long hiss. Notice that I finish before I completely run out of air, because there's always going to be a little bit of air left in the lungs with your sternum being lifted. If you actually keep that sternum lifted and you don't allow the shoulders to collapse, you'll still have a little air left over. You just want to do the exercise until you can no longer contract the abdomen. And that's where you want your screams to come from. You want your abdomen to squeeze the air out. You don't want your throat to do any of the work. So let's do a pulsating exercise. Same thing, sternum lifted, spine long and tall. Let's take a nice deep breath and Follow me here. Imitate what I do. I'm going to do 3 short longs in a row without breathing between them. And at the end, I'm going to blow out whatever I have left. And while I'm doing it, I'm going to concentrate on my sternum being lifted, and my abdomen will automatically squeeze in to support my air. Let's try it together. It's very good. So practice these before you go to scream. The next exercise is really good for false chord screamers. Normally I don't recommend using whispering for anything, but in this case we're going to use a ha, 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 ha. Now false chord screaming, the vocal cords sit apart, and we know that there's a rush of air coming out. And what happens is, in that rush of air, we're releasing it very quickly. It's not like a fry scream where we have a little bit of pressure and a little bit of time to work with. So this ha 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 also rushes the air out, and we're going to try to do it without hurting our throat, but with using air support. So we do the same thing. We imagine the sternum being lifted as we're saying ha. And what will happen is our abdomen will involuntarily squeeze and do the mechanics that we need it to do for proper false chord screaming. So let's stand nice and tall. We'll lift our sternum. We'll take a deep breath in and do 3 ha ha ha's all in a row. You'll have to breathe between each one of these ones. So it's very important that you keep that sternum lift and that you don't do this exercise like this. That is not correct. It's important to keep that sternum lifted and let the abdomen do the work. Thanks very much for trying those out with me. Now let's apply it to some screaming. The way you would apply it to a false chord scream would be by taking a deep breath in and making a big scream. So you're going to keep the sternum lifted, and let's just apply it to one long false chord scream. So you want to stand tall, get that sternum up, really fill those lungs, and then squeeze your abdomen from the bottom while keeping that sternum lifted to get a nice, relaxed, gravelly sound. And it will be powerful and loud without being painful. With screaming, you'll always feel a gravelly sensation in here, but it should never be painful or tense. It should be relaxed. It should be a loose, gravelly feeling. So let's take a deep breath in, and let's try that same sternum lift on a false chord growl. Yeah! And that's how it should look. Let me demonstrate one more time. Yeah! The same thing will happen with a fry scream. The mechanics will work the same, but because the fry scream is performed with the vocal cords sitting together, you'll have a little bit of pressure. This will be more like how it feels to breathe for singing. So the air release won't be as fast as on a false chord scream. So let's try it again with that sternum being lifted. Imagine your strength pulling it up. Let's take a deep breath in and try a fry scream. Yeah! So that's how the breathing works for screaming. Thank you guys, and do those exercises every day, and you'll start to apply them to your screaming and your performances. Thanks a lot.